Hello, everyone. Welcome to Gen Z on Gen Z, the podcast that breaks down the generation so you don't have to. As always, you have your two Gen Z strategist hosts. I am AJ.
And I'm Lilia.
And I don't know about you, but I've been waiting to talk about this for a while.
Me too.
This whole
this
loneliness
episode,
topic. It's been something that we have been seeing plague this generation in many different ways over the past few years. And I think a lot of the other things that we've talked about are very positive and Gen Z loves joy and expressing themselves and shopping and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But this is something that everyone in the generation is feeling, but a lot of older, not even just marketers, but just people don't
understand it.
They don't understand or they don't have insight into our loneliness epidemic, which we'll get into.
It is a loneliness epidemic.
Yeah.
And it's such a missed opportunity to connect, because if you're not understanding why the generation feels the way they do, it prohibits you from authentically communicating and connecting with them. So I do think this is one of the most important episodes because it is such a core trait of the generation, no matter how it manifests in people. And we'll talk through different ways that this comes to life and different reasons why. But it's gonna be important, and I think it'll foster a lot more depth that people can connect with their consumers over.
100%. So we know that Gen Z is lonely.
Mm-hmm.
They are the loneliest generation out there right now.
Over 73% of Gen Zers report feeling lonely sometimes or always, which is crazy. Over 73% is an insane statistic.
Yeah, and I think, when we think about this phrase, the loneliness epidemic, this is definitely a product of the pandemic.
100%.
And it's basically where Gen Z becoming this chronically online generation that is addicted to technology.
Yeah.
And through the proliferation of social over the past X amount of years and all these brand new ways for Gen Z to connect online, to older generations, it might be like, oh, they're more connected than ever. How are they lonely? But there is this way of communicating online with one another that cannot be replicated IRL and vice versa. All these social media platforms at large are becoming much less and less social and more just media.
Yep.
I'm becoming more of just a consumer of content, and that feels very isolating to just sit in my bed, scroll, and then that's my version of social time when I'm
that's
not
such
actually
a good point.
socializing with anyone.
Yeah, and I feel like that behavior is more of the norm amongst Gen Z. I feel like because we were exposed to social media at such a young age, the behavior, especially with Instagram in particular, because I feel like Instagram was birthed out of the idea of fostering community with friends. And I think still it's where you go to follow people and people that you do have those relationships with. But to your point, those people are posting less and less about their lives. Again, to your point, leaving them with less to connect over. And so I agree that is incredibly isolating, and it makes you look at all of your social behaviors and you find that you're investing so much more time into online social interactions versus in-person social interactions. And I think that's a huge thing with Gen Z. It's like they're spending so much time at work, on their laptops, in school, on their laptops, on their phone, texting, doing whatever, going on social, but then the day is over and they haven't connected with people IRL.
Social has become our third place. And third places, for those of you who are unfamiliar with that term, are essentially those destinations that aren't work, aren't school, and aren't home for people to go and connect. So think of the mall, or think of coffee shops or gyms or these things.
Yeah.
But for Gen Z, less and less third places are popping up for them that are free and accessible.
Yes, exactly.
We
That's
know
the key.
that we don't want to be spending money on
dinners, drinks, constantly.
And it's a great moment to connect with other people over drinks or dinner or whatnot. But then it's great, I just blew $100 that I literally don't have.
Yeah.
So it's this constant struggle and back and forth of where do I begin? What do I do? And because of this, we're seeing that according to the UN, the US actually dropped 8 spots on the list of the 143 countries happiness report this year. Not exclusively because of this, but this is a major, major component, the loneliness epidemic, to our nation being less happy than we were.
Yeah, and we're not putting systems in place to help foster those third spaces, foster that communal living. We're kind of staying in our silo. From the outside, it seems like, well, because we have our phones, because we have X, Y, and Z, it's easy to just keep it this way, but there needs to be more intentional effort on brands, businesses, and the people and us to push ourselves so that we can solve for this, because it's just going to get worse and worse as technology increases if we don't take actionable steps here. I think another symptom of the loneliness epidemic is Gen Z within the generation. It's a coming of age generation, right? So you're getting people from ages 12 to 27. And in that later part of the Gen Z generation, I think probably from ages 24 to 27, those are critical years where your brain is fully developed. For women after 25, you are kind of understanding yourself in a way that you never did because you're post-grad, you're navigating the work world, you're making new friendships, and so much about growing into yourself and discovering yourself leads to a lot of relational changes. That's a huge, huge conversation happening on TikTok in particular. I know I'm on it, friendship breakup TikTok. And it's really been fascinating to see how many people, and I'm specifically looking at women because I can relate to their experiences in a lot of ways, but figuring out these relationships, don't serve me anymore, or I feel really isolated for them, or I feel left out, or I'm questioning why there's a tear in the relationship. And it's so many people trying to figure out why these friendships are no longer working. So on top of everything we just spoke about, there's also these internal relational things that are changing because it's the time. This is when people are going through these crucial changes, but it's sad and it's lonely. So all these factors piled up on one another are really compiling to equate the loneliness epidemic. That's honestly just really hard to grapple with.
100%. However old you are in the Gen Z generation, or I'm sure millennials feel the same way in some capacity too. It really isn't an exclusive thing, but just when we think about, you were kind of mentioning before, of brands and how they can support us during this time, it's, no singular brand is going to solve the loneliness epidemic at the snap of a finger. It's really about what are those intentional moments and those things that we can do slowly and steadily and consistently for our audience to connect them.
Yeah.
And maybe, it sounds hypocritical, but what are those moments on social that we can do to maybe bring them off social?
Yeah.
Or all those things.
No, totally.
That's what we're going to dive into in a little bit today. So first, let's dive into how Gen Z and brands are currently fighting the loneliness epidemic. So we know that according to VML, 83% of American Gen Zers have a newfound appreciation for in-person interactions. This probably comes as no surprise.
Yeah.
We've been seeing research and data on this ever since quarantine ended. But in particular, 70% of Gen Zers joined a very specific community for a feeling of belonging. So we're seeing this really manifest in these interest-based social clubs. So funny enough, kind of earlier when we were talking about those third places that cost money, these all cost money, but it's really Gen Z will do anything
they're desperate
to find this community. So that's anything from gyms to art classes, pottery classes.
And I take dance classes. My dance classes are my version of that.
Love that. That's me with SoulCycle.
Yeah.
It's ironically don't talk to other people there when I'm there.
But you're around people. That's the thing.
And we're all feeling the same thing.
Yes. It's a shared experience. I think about this with dance all the time. I don't talk to people, but it's a sacred experience where I am not alone, but I'm alone with myself in a room full of people. And I do think that's the definition of a third space. Even if you're not congregating with people you're still just feeling the energy of another human being versus doing a virtual dance class at home, which a lot of people opt for. But it's opt for maybe doing it in person if you can afford it and if you have the access.
Right.
Because it'll impact your health in that way.
I know we mentioned this in our nostalgia episode, but those Luddite clubs of Gen Zers coming together in the city, specifically New York, to disconnect and be with one another. We're also seeing book clubs have a major
huge resurgence.
And again, we talked a little bit about this in our nostalgia episode about book talk, but this is really about making an event out of your book club and people every Thursday of the month going to their bestie's house and there's 5 girlies together in a circle. Charcuterie and wine, and you make it a whole big thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really interesting. It's there are these very simple systems that Gen Z can participate in to be around other people, but they are trying their best to make it as like enticing as possible, so other people
want to
come
join
and
in.
It becomes like a big thing.
I mean, I relate to this so much, and this is something else that we've seen Gen Z do with supper clubs. That's something that I initiated in my friend group, that once a month someone will host like a dinner party. And we've seen like on TikTok in particular, this mass resurgence of the dinner party and curating a dinner party, inviting like 5+ people and making it an event and having themes and creating content and just being able to gather together. But it's interesting you say that, because it's almost like people need a reason and something exciting to do it. Otherwise, they might look past it.
And we're so deep in the loneliness epidemic where it's not like foreign to us to be like, I'll sit this one out. I'll stay home on my phone.
It's a lot of effort.
Exactly.
But it used to not feel that way. And I think that's obviously the symptom of the pandemic. I don't want to go commute. But then it's like, I needed that this week.
The second that I'm there, I'm like, wait, no, this is perfect. And I leave. I get home that night being like, what a wonderful, lovely day.
Yeah, because I had social interaction. I talked to people that I care about, but it's so easy to not do it and just sit at your house. And those days that you sit at your house, you're working from your laptop, you go on your couch after work's over, you watch TV, and then you go to bed. Like, of course, your mental health's not going to be thriving because you haven't had that in-person rapport.
And another trend that we're seeing about like you're home, you watch TV, you go to bed is adult sleepovers.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm such a fan.
I'm having one tonight. I'm so excited.
That's very fun, AJ.
I like didn't even connect the dots. So that's literally is what's happening after we're done recording this. But yeah, I'm stoked. And I mean, let's get our minds out of the gutter. When we say adult sleepover,
they're literally like childlike sleepovers, movies, popcorn, pajamas.
Yeah. Board games, like the whole 9
very
yards.
Innocent.
And it's going back to that childlike sense of wonder and everything like that, but also very intentional time that you can spend with your friends that feels very comforting, feels very safe, and you can be vulnerable with them. It's just you guys in your apartment.
And it's doing exactly what you'd be doing alone, just with a friend or two. We're also seeing this really come to life in the dating world. I'm like fully entrenched in dating talk and all things dating trends, whether it's dating apps and just dating behaviors in general. And we're seeing a huge rise in the desire for speed dating and dating in person, which within the dating app world, obviously, ideally you'd be dating on the app, but we're seeing more and more apps try to figure out ways to connect the dots between, okay, if we want people to start on the app, how can we congregate our users into an in-person space, make them feel like it's more communal, because we're understanding that Gen Z is craving that in-person experience. They just need a little bit of a push. And so it's kind of connecting those dots from, again, like what we were saying earlier of online, but taking it elsewhere, knowing that this is something that our audience wants. And it's because dating on the apps can perpetuate more loneliness. I think Hinge came out with a report recently that indicated that because of the loneliness epidemic specifically, Gen Z is getting more and more restless on the apps. And so they were trying to provide solutions on how to solve for this, knowing that speed dating and like mixers and stuff like that are on the rise.
Yeah. Just such a great point of like all of these things that are supposed to connect us are making us feel more alienated at the end of the day. And that was kind of ammunition for Heineken and Bodega, the streetwear brand, to come together and create the Boring Phone. It's basically a flip phone, but it looks really cool. It's like transparent. Like the whole kind of marketing that's going behind it and the messaging is like now without dating apps, now without the selfie camera, now without TikTok or whatever, giving Gen Z, or I guess older Gen Z, younger millennials since it's Heineken, but the permission to put your phone away.
And I think something that many brands almost discredit is the fact that if you are even just putting on one of these events, that brand recognition and awareness is there. I think that's something that we talk to our brands a lot is obviously we want to highlight a product and make sure we're getting those key touch points in, but there are opportunities if you're able to do so to just host something and people will forever talk about it. People will go on a podcast and say, Heineken and Bodega did this. Like there are so many opportunities to incentivize users to engage with your brand by just hosting things that connect to this core insight, this core truth. For example, the loneliness epidemic. I have a friend who just told me that they saw an ad for a journaling meetup and they basically, the instruction was bring your journal and come to this park. And I don't think it was a branded event. I think it was an individual who wanted to do this. And I saw it as a cool opportunity for a brand. Like if you were to create a simple, like a truth is that Gen Z, again, is more emotionally aware and likes to journal. Great. How do we take that? And if you are a brand that feels like you can seamlessly integrate yourself with journaling or reflection, congregate people in a space And he said it was amazing. It was
Yeah.
like he would never think he would do something like that, and he did it, and he benefited so much. I'm like, if that was hosted by a brand, that brand would get a lot of positive sentiment.
And also, if your brand does do that, we also like free stuff. And that's a good incentive.
It's a great incentive for sure.
Beyond brands and beyond Gen Z, we're seeing many more social platforms arise to connect more and more Gen Zers constantly. This started obviously back in the day with our traditional platforms, Instagram, etc. We're seeing it now with evolving platforms like, I guess, a year ago when it was in its peak, Be Real.
Yeah,
it was,
that was a huge attempt.
Connection.
Yeah.
Yep. And
I still use Be Real, by the way. I don't care what anyone says. I still use it. I love it.
Social media is becoming all media, no social.
Yeah.
So many new platforms are bubbling up that are really prioritizing the social element. Sorry, brands. Some of them don't even want brands on it at the moment because it's for their specific mission of connecting Gen Zers. It is
supposed to be
a
just
Gen
for
Z
I mean,
space.
that's how Instagram started. That's how TikTok started. Like brands weren't on these apps at the beginning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like their time will come and it'll make sense. But for example, one platform that has been it's been talked about for quite a few months now, but still hasn't launched at the time of recording this episode.
Okay.
We'll see if it's live by then, but it's called No Space. It's basically MySpace for Gen Zers in 2024. And very nostalgic. It follows like the same kind of template of your fave friends and opportunities for you to talk about what music you're listening to, what you're doing today, like all the core tenets of what MySpace was back in the day.
And then what Facebook became.
Yeah,
totally.
Exactly. But really kind of curating it to become this playground for Gen Z to just hang out and talk to each other and not be inundated with all of this other noise that's making the connection a little less palpable or easy to participate in.
Yeah.
So another app called Uni, which again is also pretty similar to No Space. There's Buffet. So Buffet is a fairly newer app that's matching users with a person and a place to meet up. So think of like Tinder, X, Open Table.
Cool. I like that.
Yeah. So it's cool. It's basically, from what I've seen from it, it's like you match with someone or somehow are connected with someone, and then you're given options of places to go and like scheduling. So it all happens at once, which that's also going back to the dating apps. We can go on like on.
Yeah,
and
that
on
could be
about
that literally could be a whole other episode.
Gen Z is bad at either initiating or following up with plans,
Yes.
especially when it's with someone new that you don't know yet.
There's
it's
no
so easy to
stake
like make an excuse
and
not
ghost.
Yeah, exactly. So apps are really trying to dismantle that mindset and just get us like through the door, get
meet
a plan
in person,
going.
and then take it from there.
Exactly. And that brings me to another app. It's called Jagged. It's a location-based social network that is pretty much designed to get you just out more with your friends.
Love.
And at the end of 2023, there was over 10 million users on it.
I need to get on it.
Yeah.
Are you on it?
No, I haven't downloaded it
Okay,
yet.
let's download it after this. I want that.
It's like, oh, maybe I'll get to
like
it. But
maybe.
no, I should.
No, we
I
should
will.
hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
Okay. Another platform that has done a really great job at tying in this idea of connecting people is this Chinese brand called Soul. And it's an app that connects people with like-minded interests and hobbies. And the crazy thing about this is they're driven by the slogan, "May there be no lonely people in the world," which I think is beautiful. And as of June 2023, the platform had nearly 30 million monthly active users. Insane. And 80% of which were Chinese Gen Zers. That's insane.
Just to kind of chime in really quickly, knowing that we talked about the U.S. decreasing in like general happiness, we're also seeing this from a global perspective.
Totally.
Like,
it's not
just
exclusive to us. Yeah.
Yeah. And even though this app might not be available in the US, it still
tells us something.
Yeah, for sure.
Crazy. And then the last thing I'll say on this is we're also noticing Gen Z take to Facebook and putting up like friendship applications. And I think this ties back to the idea of friendship breakups and kind of figuring out what your relational groove is as you grow older. But they're taking to Facebook, putting up friendship applications, like to combat kind of the fringe friend crisis. Like you want to have these intentional, meaningful relationships. And so Gen Z girlies in particular are heading to like women only Facebook groups, and they're trying to connect with people and advertise what their ideal BFF would be like. It's almost like taking Bumble BFF and taking matters into your own hands and figuring it out on Facebook.
What's crazy to me about that, and Vice put out a wonderful article about this recently, is Gen Z doesn't like Facebook.
I know. So they're desperate.
They are.
That's telling you they're desperate.
Yeah. They are going to whatever corners of the internet
To
that
find
they
people.
can to find people.
They want friends. But with all that being said, now we really have to ask ourselves, like coming from a brand perspective, from a marketing perspective, how can brands truly position themselves as a way to connect people? So we referred to this earlier in the episode, but looking at from a marketing lens, what can we do and what has been done before to either help congregate people, connect people, even in small ways, even if it's still through social? What can this look like for different brands?
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing is just really leaning back into that concept of community and fostering these groups of people or your audience or your community by giving them something or asking them questions that they either need to hear and that they need to answer for each other, or giving them the opportunity, again, like we were just saying earlier, to connect on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Because there's platforms like Geneva that they're platforms built for brands to curate community and for the community to be involved. Depends on the brand, but like product development or like marketing focus groups or like, hey, this is what in a perfect world I'd want for this brand. And then seeing your like fingerprints on the clay, essentially, or like your consumers. But one brand that I'll talk about really briefly that does an excellent job at crafting this community amongst their audiences, We're Not Really Strangers.
Love We're Not Really Strangers. Oh my goodness. I'm on their email list. I love them so much. Yeah.
And you have like all the game packs,
I have
right?
every game pack they've ever put out. I love We're Not Really Strangers.
Do you want to explain?
I don't want to steal your talking point.
You got it.
But We're Not Really Strangers is just, they are a question game brand, and they initiated with one pack that was kind of to foster deeper and meaningful connections. They came out before the pandemic, but during the pandemic, they actually did a really cool job at doing online versions where people who were, Zoom connecting could use their templates and ask questions to, again, foster meaningful relationships during a season of real deep loneliness. And something that I really love that they do on their social media is they use each platform in a different way to foster connection and build community. So whether it's Instagram posting, like they'll have their actual card displayed on an Instagram post asking a question, and then the caption will be like, send this to your bestie or send this to someone you want to get to know better. I literally do it. Like I will send them to people I know being like, answer it right now. And it's just such a fun, easy, and accessible way to connect with people with their email list, because I'm subscribed to it. It's really cool. Every day they'll just email you either in the subject line, it'll tease like, are you ready for this? And then you open it and it's like a very like vulnerable question. And I sit with it and I use it as a journal prompt. Like it literally evokes such good actionable steps. A lot of it is virtually. So I think it is like a cool way to kind of incite more intentional virtual relationships. So really bringing people together who strive to connect in a deeper way and showing them that social media can be a place where they can find like-minded people. I think that's so beautiful. And I think that's exactly what we've spoken about all this episode is exactly what they're doing on social.
Exactly.
Big fan.
They're fantastic. I just want to just double click on one thing you mentioned of really intentional questions that you wouldn't ask yourself or wouldn't think to ask a friend, whatever. Because, you can standardly have relationships with people of just like, how's your day? What's up? What are you doing tonight? But the questions that are like, when was the last time you like felt euphoria?
Yes, literally.
And they're like intense questions.
Or like, what was the best compliment you've ever received and do you believe it?
Yes.
I'm like,
dang.
I don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a good example. Another way that brands can help connect people or foster that sense of community that makes people feel less lonely is really tapping into influencer marketing by building off of the influencers' already established communities. So that's such an important thing to look into and address and see what influencers feel like they'd be a good connection with your brand. And then again, tapping into what they have already established to then evoke more of a strong sense of community amongst people. A great brand that's done this is RSP Nutrition. They saw the massive amount of traction Alex Earl was getting, I believe like a year and a half ago. And she was always drinking their beverages before workouts, and she would talk about them very organically. And her following is a core cult following. Like she has really established a beautiful and positive community within her podcast, Hot Mess, and all these other things. Like she has a core community. And so what they did is they partnered with her to create a new energy drink. And the way that Alex really rolled this out was by always, and she still does it to this day. This has been out for a year, I think over a year, this beverage. And every time an individual posts a picture of it, tagging her, she reposts it on her story. And I think that's so rare to see influencers do. And I think that's a really good call on her end, because that's making people feel seen. That's making people feel heard. And again, that's what we were talking about earlier in terms of even a subtle thing a brand can do to just evoke a sense of comfort, even if it's not congregating in person or doing this or that. There are small ways to evoke closeness. And I think this partnership did a really great job at that. And I think that's just to tell brands, if you are able to afford, that influencer marketing strategy where you can connect people through that already established community, go for it, because that's really going to then infiltrate that community, and then you can build on it over time.
Yeah.
Huge.
God.
And it's a great beverage.
I need to try it.
Aminoline. It's great.
Is it?
Yeah. It gave me energy.
Okay. I just want to mention one other tip that comes to mind about how brands can create this IRL experience for their community and their consumers. So one great example of a brand that does this is Lululemon. They constantly are hosting these runs and these meetups for just like athletic fanatics and people that really embody or want to be a part of the Lululemon community.
Yeah.
I know that they've partnered with Strava many times to do run clubs. I know Hoka, the shoe brand, has done run clubs and like partnered with smaller run clubs. So cool. I think Adidas was involved in one potentially.
Yeah.
Basically, all that to say is these more so like athletic brands have a way in with these run clubs that they're seeing pop up in culture at large.
Bringing people together.
That's a way in. I think if you're a beauty brand, what is your version of a run club? What is your version of getting people together to either, I don't know if it's product focused, test out products, or have like a beauty thought leader available in these different places that people can go and hear speak and be a part of that conversation? Or what do those meetups look like for food brands or like beverage brands?
Yeah.
Like
there's always a common interest that drives all these groups. It's just figuring out what that is.
Sometimes it's putting the product second.
Sometimes you got to do it.
In this case, it's like you should. Like,
I agree.
Like find that, like you were saying, what is that thing that's bringing these people together just from your audience perspective? And then think of ways, okay, now how can we integrate the product in some capacity?
Because hopefully it would be such an authentic match and you're doing it under the same values and mission of your brand that the product integration will happen naturally. And it won't be a hard thing to figure out, but you really need to figure out what that core mission is that you can, especially if we're talking about IRL experiences, that you can get people together over. And then we throw in the product placement, which obviously we all want to do, but it has to feel authentic, and that's how you do it.
Yeah. Your product won't solve the loneliness epidemic, but what you do with that product or what you do with your brand could play a piece in the puzzle of getting Gen Zers to feel less lonely, or to feel happier.
100%.
So.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So with all that being said, the loneliness epidemic has really led Gen Z to move towards brands that either, represent a community that they see themselves in, aspire towards, much like the Alex Earl and RSP Nutrition collab, or the brands that are in touch with their emotions or are able to evoke more of an emotional response, much like We're Not Really Strangers, or the brands that are able to naturally congregate people IRL, like the Lululemon example. There are so many different ways to connect people, again, from big ways to small ways. There's no one size fits all for this. I want to emphasize that so much because a small thing can go a very long way, like AJ said. So with all that being said, again, we're not solving the epidemic, but we're here to help in whichever way we can. And as marketers, we have a responsibility to our audience to make their lives a little bit easier and more enjoyable. So
100%. And with that, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Gen Z on Gen Z. We really appreciate you guys tuning in. Give us 5 stars, 4 stars, be honest. Give us thoughts, give us comments. Email us at genzongenz@movershakers.co if you have any questions or ideas for upcoming episodes that you want us to talk about. But until then, we'll catch you on the flip side.
Catch you on the flip, everyone. Mwah.